In this class, we are going to study about the second organ in the male reproductive system, and this is the most important organ or the structure of the male reproductive system, and that is the testis. So we had completed the structure in which the testis is located, and the structure in which the testis is located is called as the scrotum. So we have studied about the scrotum in our previous class, and from this class we are going to study about the testis. So this testis that we are going to study is the most important and the primary sex organ in the case of human males. So primary sex organs means that it is that organ which is going to produce the sex cell or the gamete, and in this case we are going to see that this testis will form the sperms. And also, apart from producing sperms, this testis is also responsible for the production of male sex hormone that is called as the androgens, and the main male sex hormone is the testosterone. So there are also other hormones, but the main and the most important hormone that we are going to study is the testosterone. So this is the function of the testis, that is production of the male androgens and also the production of male sex cells or gametes, or we normally call that sperms. So this is the longitudinal section of the testis, and that is the transverse section of the testis. So we have to study both these diagrams for our NEET syllabus, and if we cut the testis longitudinally, we get this sort of a structure. This is a highly diagrammatic representation and not a very much exact representation. So if we see the longitudinal diagram of a testis, then we have to first see the three coverings of the testis, and those are the tunica vaginalis, the tunica albuginea, and the tunica vasculosa. So we will study about each of these structures in detail after studying this diagram. So first of all, these three are the covering. So this tunica vaginalis is the outermost covering of the testis, and just inside is the tunica albuginea. This is a fibrous coating of the testis, and beneath that layer, the layer which we find is the tunica vasculosa. So this layer composes of blood vessels like arteries or veins or capillaries, and along with it a few connective tissues are also present in this case, that is the tunica vasculosa. Now apart from these three membranes or three layers that we have to study, when we come inside these three layers, first of all we see many compartments like this, that is called as testicular lobules. So a testis does not contain only this many lobules, it contains much more lobules, so we cannot draw that much in this diagram, so I have drawn a few. So these compartments that you are seeing, and beneath which or under which we are going to study about seminiferous tubules, so these compartments are called as testicular lobules, and approximately a testis has 200 to 250 testicular lobules, and inside these testicular lobules is the main structure, and that is called as seminiferous tubule. This is the tubule that we are going to study over here. So we will study about that. This seminiferous tubule is responsible for the production of sperms because it has the germinal epithelium. So this is the longitudinal section, and you cannot see the germinal epithelium here, but you can see the germinal epithelium in the transverse section of the testis. So you can see here the outer layer of the cells. In all these cases, the outer layer of the cell is called as the germinal epithelium. So these are the main cells or the fertile layer of the testis. So this germinal epithelium, that is the outermost layer of the cell, this will ultimately produce the sperm. This is the main cell from which all the stages of sperm formation come from, and ultimately the sperms get formed. So this germinal epithelium is located inside the seminiferous tubule. As you can see, we have a complete seminiferous tubule over here, and likewise parts of other seminiferous tubules that are present over here. So this is the germinal epithelium of the seminiferous tubule. So this seminiferous tubule has the germinal layer which ultimately produces the sperms. Now we come to the other part, that is if we move ahead of the seminiferous tubule. So if sperms or spermatozoa or spermatids, whatever be the stage, those are formed in the seminiferous tubules. And after the seminiferous tubule, when the testis move when the sperms in the testis move out of the testis, so the part where they reach is called as the retitestis. So this portion is also the testis, but this portion, this is a network of very thin tubules that you can see here, and this network is called as retitestis. So after the seminiferous tubule, the sperms travel to the retitestis, and after the retitestis they pass through certain narrow tubules which are called as vasa efferentia, that is this one. So after the seminiferous tubule we have retitestis, and after the retitestis we have this vasa efferentia, and after the vasa efferentia the sperms are carried to the epididymis. So normally we differentiate the epididymis into three parts, that is the caput, that is the corpus, and the cauda. So these are the three parts. So caput is the topmost portion of the epididymis, like you can see over here. This is the topmost portion of the epididymis, and the middle portion is called as the corpus epididymis, and the lowermost portion, that is this part, is called as the cauda epididymis. And now after the epididymis, the structure or the tubule or the tube which carries the sperms forward is called as vas deferens, that is this blue tube that you can see here, this is the vas deferens. So in a longitudinal section of the testis, we normally have to study about these parts. So we will study about each of these layers in detail after seeing this diagram. So now this was the longitudinal section of the testis. So now we will study the lateral or the transverse section of the testis. So here we have seen some seminiferous tubule, that is the blue colored tubules that you can see, and now we are gonna see the transverse section of these tubules or the transverse section of this testis. So apart from that, you can see here there are lots of testicular lobules. So there are certain spaces which are called as interstitial spaces, and we will see that what are present at the interstitial spaces. So this is the transverse section of the testis, and when we see the transverse section of the testis, we get to see lots of these circular transverse or outline cross section of certain tubules which are called as seminiferous tubules from here. Now inside one seminiferous tubule we have lots of different structures, and first of all we are going to see long pillar like cells like these. So it's not necessary that only 5 will be present, it could be more, it could be less than that. So this tall pillar like cells are called as Sertoli or sustentacular cells. We will study later that these Sertoli cells are really important for nourishing the sperms in their maturation phase or in their development. Apart from that, these Sertoli cells also produce something which is called as ABP or androgen binding protein. So it concentrates the testosterone inside the tubule. So we are going to study later this function of this Sertoli cells. So these Sertoli cells are present in between the germinal epithelium, or we can say that in between the spermatogonia. So apart from these Sertoli cells, when we see the outermost part, we have already seen this germinal epithelium, that is you can see here outside every seminiferous tubule the outermost layer is the germinal epithelium, like this one, and this one. So this is the layer which is ultimately going to divide or develop into the sperm through meiosis. So this germinal epithelium develops, the cells of this germinal epithelium divides or develops and forms spermatogonia. So that spermatogonia is also called as sperm mother cell or SMC. So after spermatogonia, in the phase of development and maturation of sperm, the structure that is called as primary spermatocyte, and then the secondary, then the spermatid, and then the spermatozoa stage. So when we will study about spermatogenesis in this chapter, we are going to study about these stages, that is from spermatogonia to spermatozoa to sperm. So all these structures we have to study in detail in the topic that is gametogenesis, and in gametogenesis we have to study about spermatogenesis. Apart from that, a few structures are important. First is the Leydig cell. Now this Leydig cell is a very important structure. Though it is very small in number, you can see these only aggregations of cells are the Leydig cell, but their function is to produce the main male sex hormone, and that is called as testosterone. So these Leydig cells, this space is called as interstitial space. So between any two seminiferous tubule, you can see certain spaces. These spaces are called as interstitial space, and the cells present over the interstitial space is called as interstitial cell. and these are also called as Leydig cell. So instead of Leydig cell, we can also have written that interstitial cells. So these cells are responsible for the production of male sex hormone, and that main male sex hormone is called as testosterone. Apart from that, obviously every living tissue requires blood, because blood supplies nutrients and oxygen, and apart from that, blood takes away waste. So it is very much obvious that in any organ we will have blood supply. So you can see blood vessels here and there. So apart from that, in the interstitial space, we have already seen the Leydig cell. Now there are certain seminiferous tubule in one testicular lobule. So here you can see different testicular lobules. So in one testicular lobule, we can have 1, 2 or 3, or maybe, so in certain cases, more number of this seminiferous tubule. So one testicular lobule can have 1 or 2 or 3 normally seminiferous tubules. So this was the transverse section of the testis, and this is the longitudinal section of the testis. After this, we are going to study about each of the structure that we have seen here in detail, and we will first start from the tunica vaginalis, and thereby we are going to study each of these structure. What are they composed of, where are they located, what is their function, what is their origin, and all likely whether the different structures are present or what function they perform. So we are going to study about those things later in this class. Now we would study about the testis. That is, we have just now seen the diagram of the testis in the longitudinal section as well as in the transverse section. So now we would study about the details of the contents of the testis, or the structures which are located inside the testis. So first of all, we have to see what is the testis. So testis is the primary sex organs of males, that is in the case of humans and other mammals also. So this is the primary male sex organ, and it is also in pair, that is 2 testes are present. So the difference between testis and TES is the singular and plural. So this, now many students have confusion regarding this testis and the testes. So remember that this is plural, that is TES is the plural, which includes both the testis, and testis is the singular part. So don't confuse between these two. So this pair of primary sex organ, and it is located not inside the abdomen, but in after birth or after 7th or 8th month of pregnancy, the testes are located in the scrotal sac. So that scrotal sac is extra abdominal, that is, it is outside the abdomen. So the testes are the primary male sex organs, and there are a pair of testes, that is 2 testes are present in each scrotal sac. So scrotum has 2 sacs. In each sac we have 1 testis. So this testis is located in the extra abdominal sac, that is called as the scrotum. Now the testes are not from the beginning, the testes are not in the scrotum. They are developed in the lower abdominal cavity. That is when the fetus is in its initial phase of development, that is in the initial months of pregnancy, the testis in the fetus develops in the abdominal cavity, that is in the lower abdominal cavity, and from there the testis descends into the scrotum in the 7th month of pregnancy, or the 7th month of development of fetus. So the testis descends into the scrotum. It is not formed in the scrotum, but it is formed in the lower abdominal cavity. Now we have to study about something that is called a gubernaculum. So it is the fibrous connective tissue, and it connects the fetal testis to the bottom of the scrotum. Now the scrotum is initially formed, and it is always on the outside of the body. So towards the bottom of the scrotum, this fibrous cord is located, or fibrous connective tissue is located, and this connects to the testis. Now it has a very important role. Now we had just seen that the testis descends into the scrotum in the 7th month. So this is the structure which is responsible for the descent of the testis. So without the scrotum, without the gubernaculum, the testis cannot descend into the scrotum. In higher classes you will study about that this gubernaculum does not extend, or it rather pulls the testis into the scrotum through the inguinal canal. So this gubernaculum, it is responsible for the descent of the testis into the scrotum. And In higher classes also you will study about this structure in detail. Now after that juvenaculum, first of all we are going to start from the main portion of the testis, and that is the first of all the protective covering of the testis. So the first protective covering of the testis is called as tunica vaginalis. So this is a very outward coating, and it is not exactly the covering of the testis, but it is generally included in the testis covering. So it is a flat sac-like structure and present on the side opposite to the epididymis. We just have seen the diagram of the testis, and we saw that tunica vaginalis was on the opposite side of the epididymis. Epididymis was on the other side and the tunica vaginalis was on the other side. So it is located on the opposite side to the epididymis. Now it has a coelomic cavity and it has a certain fluid fill inside it. So there must be some function of this, that is tunica vaginalis. So the main function is the frictionless sliding of the testis. So it is also a representative that the testis develops in the abdominal cavity, not in the scrotum. But you will study about this in your higher classes. So this tunica vaginalis is not exactly the covering of the testis. It is actually formed inside the abdominal cavity, and it is a proof that the testes are formed in the abdomen, not in the scrotum. So it helps in the frictionless sliding of the testes. That is, the testes are not totally fixed inside the scrotum, but they can move, and it helps in the frictionless sliding, so that there is no friction or the testes do not get damaged due to the rubbing effect. Now we come to the tunica albuginea. So obviously it lies on the inner side, and this tunica albuginea, it is the actual covering of the kidney or actual covering of the testis. This tunica vaginalis is not the actual covering of the testis. So this is the actual covering of the testis. It is formed of white fibrous collagenous tissue. So you must have heard about collagenous tissue and also about yellow elastin tissue. So this white fibrous collagenous tissue is present at many places inside the body, especially inside the tendons as well as in the bones. So this collagen fiber, this collagenous tissue provides strength to this layer. Therefore it is a very protective covering of the testis. And a very important function is that we have studied about testicular lobules. In the diagram we have just seen that there were around 250 lobules in the testis. So it is this layer which is forming those 250 lobules or the compartments. So this layer also passes into the testis. So this layer does not cover the testis. It's just not on the outer surface of the testis. It is going inside the testis, and inside it is forming the septa. And because of this septa, there are 250 lobules around in the testis. So this septa is important. This septa is formed by the tunica albuginea, and because of this septa there are around 250 compartments or lobules in each testis. And now we come to the innermost, and that is the tunica vasculosa. Then obviously when the word vascular or vasculosa comes, it means that there would be blood supply. So it is a very loose connective tissue, and it is richly supplied with blood capillaries, that is blood vessels. So wherever vasculosa word comes in the case of animals, we know that it would be including the blood supply. Now we come to the testicular lobules. So this septa is forming around 250 testicular lobules. So these are certain compartments formed due to the septa. Inside each testicle or testicular lobule, we have around 1 to 3 seminiferous tubule, and inside these seminiferous tubule there is a certain membrane called as basement membrane, and on that basement membrane is the actual sperm forming layer, and that is called as germinal epithelium. So when we will study about spermatogenesis in this chapter later, we will again study about this germinal layer which is present in the seminiferous tubule. That is, each seminiferous tubule has a basement membrane, and on this basement membrane the germinal epithelium or the cells of the germinal epithelium are present. So this basement membrane and germinal epithelium. We will study later that it is actually the germinal epithelium, which we will see that it will give rise to the spermatogonia or the primary spermatocyte, secondary spermatocyte, spermatid, spermatozoa and sperms. So this is the main fertile layer of the testis, or the main fertile part of the testis. Now a few tall cells are present in between the germinal epithelial cells, and these cells are called as Sertoli or sustentacular cells. So we will see that these Sertoli or sustentacular cells will lead to the nourishment, or their main function is the nourishment of the sperms which are getting developed or formed. And in the initial phases of the sperms development, this is also nourishing the remnant or the first phase of the sperms. So this is the function of the Sertoli or sustentacular cells. One more function is that they secrete something called as ABP, that is the androgen binding protein. It will concentrate the testosterone inside the tubule. Apart from that, these will also secrete another hormone which is called as inhibin. So that inhibin will inhibit the FSH synthesis, that is called as follicular stimulating hormone synthesis. That is, this interstitial or this sustentacular cells will secrete the inhibin, which will inhibit the FSH release from the pituitary gland. So that we are going to study that also later in the case of spermatogenesis or the hormonal control of the testis. So when we will study about the hormonal control, we will study about the ABP, that is the androgen binding protein, and also about the inhibin. Both are released from this sustentacular or Sertoli cell. Apart from that, we have just seen in the diagram that in between the seminiferous tubule there was a certain space, and that space is called interstitial space. And in those interstitial spaces, certain cells are present which are called as interstitial cells, or these are also called as Leydig cell. So the function of these Leydig cell is obviously the production of the male androgen, that is the male sex hormone. And in our syllabus, the main male sex hormone that we have to study is the testosterone. So we can say that the function of the Leydig or the interstitial cell is the production of male sex hormone, that is the testosterone. Then we come to the other part of the testis, that is the rete testis, or the above that or the beyond the rete testis we have something called as vasa efferentia. So when we come to this rete testis, these are formed by the joining of the seminiferous tubule to form a network of ductules. So obviously the seminiferous tubules are not open at both ends. They are closed at one end, and therefore at the other end the various seminiferous tubules coming from the various testicular lobules, these join and form a network of ductules which we had seen in the diagram. And that network of ductules, that thin ductule network, is called as rete testis. And from the rete testis another few ductules arise, and those are called as vasa efferentia. So from the rete testis these few ductules arise, those are called as vasa efferentia, and these carry the sperms from the rete testis to the epididymis. And obviously after this vasa efferentia we are going to study about epididymis and also vas deferens. So we have completed the main part, that is the main part of the testis, and only if one portion is remaining, and that is the epididymis, and also the duct which arises from the epididymis, which is called as vas deferens.